Just before you talk, I'm just going to get the other guests on as well so they can listen fully to what you're saying. Marlene Pradornou, who is from Veolia, very well known in the UK, French waste management company, very innovative indeed on the subject of recycling and waste. She's head of research and development there. Welcome to you. Come and take a seat. Also, Roberto Delgado Rosa is Director of Natural Capital and part of the EU. And he is replacing Daniel on your sheet there. Welcome, and thank you very much for coming. And Ana Paula Traveres, who is from the Rainforest Alliance. There you are. Please come and take a seat. Yes. Hello, nice to see you. Come take a seat. So as I said, John is going to talk to us for about 15 minutes, I think, to start with. And then that's going to help form our debate on the subject. John, please take it away.
Thanks very much. Well, good afternoon, everybody. We've had a wonderful set of presentations and discussions already today. And in this final session, we're going to be thinking about some of the innovation opportunities that we perceive exist. My work, as Tanya said, involves an interest in food systems, and I believe that's one of the potential avenues to move forward within. And so I'll be discussing the notion of agricultural innovation systems in the context of food systems and the SDGs. So I have a button here, and it works. Here's the slide we saw earlier from Jeff Sachs. I've just put in sort of the stronger colors, those SDGs where I feel the agricultural innovation systems perspective can be most effective, particularly in a synergistic way, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. There's a definition, if you will, at the bottom of the slide now as to what agricultural innovation systems are all about, and here I'm saying they're effectively ways of embracing not just the science, suppliers, the research community as such, in thinking about how to do things differently, but the totality of the interactions between all the actors involved in the innovation process itself, and we'll come back to that a bit more. So my question to start with is, how does the agricultural innovation system as a concept and a perspective actually mesh with the food systems perspective? Well, what is the food systems perspective? And the way I understand this food system is that they're what's called complex adaptive systems. They're effectively capturing interactions among many actors, all of whom have a range of activities, all of whom, of course, are influenced by a very wide range of factors, environmental, social, economic, technological, moral sometimes, philosophical. And those environments, those drivers dictate how the actors undertake their activities. What the AIS system does is really to recognize in the same way that there are interactions among the key food system actors and their activities. So I do believe that the agricultural innovation system we'll be talking about in this session does have a very close meshing with the food system, and I will argue that in fact by bringing them together we're in a much stronger place. So here we have at the top of the slide some of the, well, we've had a number of data on the table today, but the ones I'm using are very round numbers. On the left, about 1 billion people who are hungry, who have insufficient nutrients. Next one over is arguably 2 billion people in addition, who perhaps have enough calorie but not enough nutrients, protein and micronutrients, of course. Over on the right, my reading of a big metadata review in The Lancet is that in excess of 2.5 billion of us with too much. And so that in effect leaves half or perhaps just under half the global population with the right diet, very similar to what Jeffrey Sachs was saying. The undernutrition has been a spectre for many decades. Here we have a few bits of data. You may be familiar with them. They're alarming, they're distressing to see. They are nonetheless facts. We also have these data which reflect what's going on the right. And over the globe, 2.5 billion, that should say, globally. In the UK, just to bring it down to a national level, about 1 in 5 children in year 6 are now obese, and the diabetes sufferers, many, many, many millions globally. That, of course, has a huge financial cost. And this notion of what's called the overlapping burden of malnutrition, where malnutrition means bad nutrition, it doesn't mean under or over, it means bad nutrition, is arguably the new normal, this big report from IFPRI and the like. So I'd like to just remind ourselves of this very well used definition of food security from the FAO96 World Food Summit, tweaked a little bit subsequently, but in essence it's there for us to read, and I'm sure many of you know it. I'd like to draw attention, with reference to the most recent slide, to this word there, sufficient. Now, when this definition was coined in 96 or thereabouts, the emphasis, the embedded emphasis, the implication was for those people who don't have enough. In fact, I believe the definition is as pertinent today, in fact, more pertinent than it was then, because by the understanding of the word sufficient, it also means the right amount. And this quotation from an influential McKinsey report in November 14, you can read, it's quite a spectre, half the global adult population overweight within 15 years. Now, that is going to have massive implications for health budgets as well as environment. We know already, again, we've heard it several times in a variety of ways today, the impact our current technologies have on natural resources. You can see the statistics there. And what we're interested in, of course, also is the need to recouple the way we do business. Recoupling is a word that's been used very much in the notion of this, I'll just go back one slide, this report from the International Resource Panel of UNEP. It's going to be launched at the UNEA in a couple of months' time in Nairobi. Food Systems and Natural Resources is what the report will be called. But the point about it is that it stresses this need to recouple a number of things. We need to recouple consumers with their diets and other food issues. We had a debate about that just a few moments ago. We also, of course, need to recouple the nutrients in food from the whole food system, waste not just from the human waste, which is obviously a very important aspect, but all the waste all the way along the food chain can be and should be, and indeed I would use the word must be, recoupled with the agricultural base. Doing that benefits a number of SDGs. And it provides opportunities for businesses to do that recoupling. It provides opportunities for agriculture to save money on fertilizer, qua the last discussion in the panel. It obviously helps health. It helps improve the understanding of the food system with us, the general public. So, coming back to the topic of the speech, of the session, disrupting innovation systems. Can disrupting the classic approach, the linear model of technology transfer help? Linear model, do research, hand it to an extension service, and on to the farmer, has some benefits. It's now recognized that, in fact, a more interdisciplinary understanding of that, a lot of social science involved, is important. But think back to that definition from the World Bank, and what we're really talking about now is a move towards innovation mode 3, which recognizes the fact that we are dealing with a complex system. Recall the fact I mentioned food systems are complex adaptive systems. This is what we are dealing with. We therefore need another mode of interaction. Innovation 3 is based on a number of things. It's based on the dynamics, understanding the dynamics of these complex social and economic systems. We've just got to get our head around the fact we don't have a nice linear chain, huge number of feedbacks involved within it. It, of course, accepts that innovation 1 and 2 are there, were there, have value, and where there is value to be found, we build on that. It also recognizes other aspects, which perhaps we haven't involved so far, ethics, philosophies, cultures, religion, all sorts of things can come in to shape the decisions of the actors in the food chain. And it needs to combine both the institutional innovation that we've been talking about today with some of the technical opportunities which surely are emerging. The last point, I think, is perhaps very important. I won't say the most important, but it really understands and deals explicitly with who's in charge, the power and the politics of the whole business. So, how can all this help address the challenges we've been hearing, the agricultural challenges and other food system challenges? Well, a number of things. I won't read it all, but it obviously strengthens linkages between the established food system actors. That is, helps to link us, the consumers, as we've been using the word all day, with the producers, with the whole chain. It supports new actors emerging on the block. It provides what I call institutional space to allow a diversity of innovation options. It helps stimulate institutional change, and by that I mean the rules of the game. So I don't mean the institutions in their bricks and mortar, I mean the institutions in the way they operate. And having a good sort of think about shaking that is perhaps sensible. Last but not least, it builds capacity for learning across the whole piece. But of course, as we've heard today, there isn't a fix. There are multiple situations, there's no single answers, and I think in order to demonstrate the value of Mode 3 thinking, one needs to take a case study, an example. And the example I'm going to discuss very briefly is the innovation to increase the proportion and variety of legume crops, which means tremendous opportunity for the agricultural community, in order to provide more plant protein in diet, which provides a huge opportunity for a whole bunch of other actors, as we will see. Some of the key innovation bottlenecks in the protein system, as described by in the Protein Challenge 2040, a big effort led by Forum for the Future in collaboration with a whole bunch of other actors. We're thinking about the challenge of developing either indigenous plant sources or whole new varieties to be effective and useful protein sources. We're thinking about the challenges of how one scales that up. One thinks about the challenges of developing the primary processing so that it can cope with these new plant materials with perhaps slightly different biological profiles. It addresses the challenge of how we get us as society to accept more plant protein in our diets. And one of the reasons for going for this is that plant protein, legume particularly, are both good for nutrition, but they're also very good for environment. And this is some data from a paper by Dave Tillman in Nature, Tillman Clark, a year or so ago, which plots on the y-axis the grams of CO2 carbon equivalent per gram of protein. And along here we see a whole range of different sources of food, and I've just noted legumes, as you can see, is one of the very lowest, obviously compared to meats, compared to fish. Legumes are good for nutrition and good for environment. They're also potentially very good for new agri-food business. So here we've got an AIS perspective. The people at the top, the nutritionists, the anthropologists, the behavioral psychologists and the like, who are interested in helping us adopt a new or different diet, an innovative diet. Down at the bottom we have plant breeders who are doing a wonderful job in developing innovative plants. And what we're interested in is who do these people need to talk to? They don't talk to each other directly very often. It's important that the guys at the top who are trying to get us to change our diet talk to the people who are making innovative foodstuffs. And the guys at the bottom need to talk to the agrobiodiversity researchers. And both of those communities need to speak to the middlemen, if you will, in this equation, the people who take the raw material from the farm gate and turn it into an ingredient, which then goes on into the food system, and the agriculturalists who need to be talking to the agrobiodiversity people to think about the best farming system to produce the crop. One of the big bottlenecks in this process, which on the face of it looks straightforward, is this bit in the middle. And the two questions could be asked of either party of the other, by either party of the other. Is the plant material suitable for how we do our primary processing? Or put it the other way around, have you guys got the processing techniques and technologies ready for these innovative plants? Together we need to crack these questions. And so the intensity of the debate, if you will, is kind of in this diagram. The need for the dialogue is the strongest in the middle, but it has to, of course, respect moving out in both towards the nutritionalists and to the plant breeders. So the point is, it's not just the plant breeders going to crack this, or it's the nutritionalists, or it's the agriculturalists. It is a combination needed, and all of that has to be done within the context of looking at business opportunities. And for all that to happen, we have to have these enabling conditions. It's all got to be just right, the sort of Goldilocks spot. We've got to have the opportunity to understand how to sustainably cultivate these new plants. We need to understand how to develop better processing technologies. For instance, dry extraction of protein instead of the current wet and energy-intensive process. We need to understand the value chains that offer the business opportunities to allow the entrepreneur's approach to help drive this forward. We need to get our heads around ourselves. Are we willing to have this sort of stuff in our diets? And we need this shared vision and commitment of all involved to make this move forward. Regulation and policy has to be in place to support it. It can't lag it, and we need to make sure it keeps up. So my last point, really, last couple of slides here, just looking specifically at some of the indicators behind the SDGs, and I've zoomed in on number 17 here, which is about partnerships. Innovative research and implementation partnerships are needed to do this. It's not just the same old gang, the mates talking to each other. We need to think about 17.16, enhancing the global partnerships for sustainable development. Multi-stakeholder perspectives. We also need to recognize 1717, effective public-private partnerships in research particularly, which is the world I work in, but to have this experience and resourcing strategies for these partnerships. And one good example, which I like to use because I'm involved in it, is this work from the International Life Sciences Institute SimSans program, which has brought together a wide range of actors. You recognize the logos, I'm sure, including Syngenta, one of our hosts for this meeting. Many major universities, a lot of government departments. This is now a debate which is going forward. There's a major paper out recently. And when one brings in, through our own bilateral arrangements, all our links with the NGO community, we have a very, very powerful group of actors to take this forward. So to conclude, Tanya, what I've got here is a statement that all perspectives, all the agriculture innovation systems perspectives can help address multiple SDGs. The point is that I think they can be most effective if they're captured within the context of an understanding of the food system rather than just the agricultural system, because that is where the overall change is needed, and it actually opens up tremendous opportunities for agriculturalists to think about new crops, to think about new ways of consuming, to think about new ways of having a relationship with us, the consumer. And if I may, one final point, Jeffrey Sachs was saying he puts his money on number 4, quality education. I'm particularly interested as well in number 12, which is responsible consumption. And while we've largely been talking about the production angle of all of this, unless we get our heads around how to better manage consumption, we are going to have a big challenge. So what I've tried to do is sum up some of the opportunities for thinking about agricultural innovation in a broader way. I've tried to map it to some of the understandings of what food systems are, who are the actors, and all of that. And I believe that if one brings together this AIS perspective with a robust food system concept, we have a much better chance of finding synergy between the various goals, rather than just picking them off one by one in the silo approach, which has been referred to during the day. Let me leave it there. Thank you.
John, thank you. John, just as you're sitting down, and just a quick thought at the beginning, I noticed there you finished with that, but in a way it is the starting point. And it's very clear to me that the interested parties, which are very disparate, it's very fragmented, need to find themselves on the same page. And you've ended with that thought. Do you have just a quick thought as to how that might happen? I mean, what I'm thinking is there somehow a way of creating some kind of shared vision?
I'd like to say that the shared vision is already created. The challenge is how do we kind of get to it? And who's in charge of that process? Earlier today we had the notion of governance. Somebody put their finger on the fact that we need better governance of managing these, the pathways to these. And so I think it's going to be all of those I've mentioned in my short presentation. I wouldn't say there's, I haven't got the answer, but I think we do have a common shared vision, a more sustainable future, and that's the bottom line.
Okay, let's start with, we were talking a little bit about regulation and government and so on. Humberto, let me ask you, do you think that there is a shared vision, but it's not clear yet how to communicate, how to implement it? And if there is a shared vision, would you be able to encapsulate what it was?
I would say there's an embryo of...
There's an embryo of a shared vision.
Nice word.
But it's only an embryo. Sustainability or sustainable something attracting all.
Oh, sorry, we can't hear. Is it possible to sort out his microphone? That's okay. Is that working now? No, no? We may need to come and sort you out.
Maybe I postpone my reply for a minute.
Yeah, exactly. Let's hear from Anna from the Rainforest Alliance. Do you think there's a shared vision?
I do believe that there is...
Can we hear her?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Marlene, would you like to try? Oh, there we go. Okay,
I'll
let's
try.
come back to you, Humberto, then.
So on the shared vision, I was saying around sustainability, there's an embryo of shared vision, because usually we just tap from sustainability the angle that's dearest to us. So if we want to make it really a shared vision, we must also go towards understanding the angle of the other in the way it's looking to sustainability. To give you an example on this approach to rethinking innovation, for some innovation will mean technology. So it's the next brand, the next silver bullet that will come from whatever biotechnology approach and so far. And of course, there's room for technology towards sustainability. But for me, it's much more on the systems and on the processes that we can tap a lot of innovation from the knowledge that exists, also from the social, economic, ecological angle. If we will tap from what science can deliver us on ecosystem-based approaches as applied to production, green infrastructure opportunities that also deliver ways to combat pests, to approach fertilizers differently, I think this is one angle that's missing on the wider agriculture sustainability debate.
Anna.
I do believe that there is a shared vision. What I'm not sure if there is the will.
If it's what?
The will.
The will.
The will, yes. I think we're really great at getting together and talking about what is needed, setting goals, setting targets, but are we really willing to really commit to what it takes in terms of collaboration, investment, and shift of culture, real shift of culture? I'm not going to put you all to the task, but I bet if we really honestly answer, all of us here in this room, how many of us live our lives knowing what we know? Do we all take every action that we could to contribute toward a sustainable future in everything we do, each one of us? I can honestly tell you I don't, and I'm passionate about all of this. So I think that we have not quite gotten, as much as we talk about these issues, how serious they are. and how short of a window of opportunity we have to make a transformative, systemic shift that will make the difference that we need.
Do you think, sorry to interrupt, but right at the start of the day, it was made very clear to us that this should be, but perhaps wasn't being, included enough in the climate change agenda, given the effect that it was going to have. Do you think that that will give an extra push? Because it really does all point in the same direction, in a way, doesn't it? I mean, there's no conflict of agenda between climate change and zero hunger.
Yes, I see them. I see them all interconnected, and that is critical. I don't think that we can deal with the poverty issues with. Well, actually, I don't need to describe them. I think the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, we at the Rainforest Alliance are very supportive. We strongly believe in its vision and complexity, and what it's going to take to achieve them over the next couple of decades. However, I think that we're still placing little band-aids on these issues and not really realizing that it's not about us adjusting businesses as much as we can within its boundaries to address these issues. But I actually think that it's us realizing that this planet is not negotiating. We can negotiate as long as we want among ourselves, but the planet is not negotiating, and its boundaries are real. And we need to adjust everything else to conform to those boundaries.
Molly.
Okay, to add something, because we are in Brussels, to help this and to help the development of sustainability, agriculture is more sustainable, common rules, common regulation can help to develop some innovation model that are used and common in some countries and that could be more difficult to apply in other. I'll just take one example of water and of reuse of water. In some countries, it's very common to reuse treated water for irrigation, but in some countries, it's more difficult to put that in application because of social acceptance, because of the regulation, and common rule on that topics could maybe help the development of this sort of practice. And I think there could be no sustainable agriculture without any sustainable water management.
Okay, let me come back to this issue of the fact that there are many different stakeholders and they are not all connected. We were talking about this last night. You know, in some parts of the world, farmers have no access to the internet. They may not be able to read the language which is available to them on the internet, and they also may find that they have difficulties reading altogether. And so, you know, technology has a role to play here, doesn't it? Anybody?
Yes. So we at the Rainforest Alliance, we're working with close to 1.3 million farmers. So about 10 years ago, when we were working with tens of thousands of farmers or so, we could train them individually. But if we're really going to make a difference, and right now we're working with over 1 million, but over the next 5 years, we want to reach 3 million farmers. About 90% of certified farmers that we work with are smallholders. How are we going to connect with them and bring them in to markets and help them with compliance, with best practices, traceability, and a number of issues? How are we going to provide training to them? Obviously, as a medium-sized NGO, we're not going to be able to reach them one-on-one. So we're looking at technologies, but then you look at them and their level of literacy and a number of issues. It's one challenge after other. But we have a really exciting pilot just completed in Guatemala, where we are using mobile technology, using more visuals than text, in a system that they can download everything when they have access to the internet at a cooperative, but then offline access information that they can both get from us in terms of training and technology and different issues, but also get information from them. But where we want to get is where we can get coffee farmers in Guatemala communicating with coffee farmers in Vietnam about the solutions they have found to deal with royal or any other issue. So I think there is a bright future in terms of use of technology to connecting smallholders, training, building their capacity, and access to businesses that right now they are not able to.
Any other thoughts on that connectivity issue? Yeah, please.
First, on technology role to bring to smallholders access to information technology, renewable energy, that's one technology we should deliver. What I don't think is, for such cases, is the new seed technology, pesticide technology, or fertilizer technology they will need. We just bring it and voila, they use it. Their problem is solved. That's exactly for them that I think that a functional biodiversity approach that can reduce other inputs from tapping from the local conditions, that actually sometimes they are keen on knowing about them. They were kind of disused. So again, I think this process innovation from the angle of ecosystems can help precisely the smallholders that have no income or access to the wider technology approach.
Okay, we heard a little bit more from Tim also about technology, didn't we? I was slightly interrupting you when you were talking about recycling and waste and so on. This has been a big subject for us, is the issue of waste. Now, we've talked about it mostly in the context of food waste and crop waste. But what Veolia does is groundbreaking in this area. Could you tell us a little bit about how you are using waste? Of course, you're not attempting to reduce it. That's not your business, right? But what you are doing is using it very carefully. Could you give us a couple of examples? You were talking about water, but anything else you could tell us about?
Okay, with pleasure. We can talk about organic waste, of course, and treating waste to produce fertilizers, to produce organic amendment, to enrich soil. And I will also add maybe the notion of energy production. And what we can provide as a services technology concept is with the methanization. With methanization system, transforming the organic waste in energy and also in fertilizers. And in a merchant plant, you can treat waste from the cities, waste from the farmers, crops, manure, but also waste from the agro-industry. Treat it all together in a merchant plant, produce energy, electricity or biogas that's going to go in the grid, and also fertilizers. Fertilizers rich in nitrogen and also in organic content. So with this waste treatment, can produce energy and treat altogether waste from different kind of area, cities, farming, industry, and also produce recycled fertilizers. We can go also further with technology, with innovating technology for extracting nitrogen, phosphorus from this flux, and then have a better way of fertilizing. You can fertilize with directly the residue of the methanization, but if you can extract nitrogen, it's like mineral nitrogen, so it's the same way of fertilizing like farmers are used to, so it's more easier for them to use it. And also the carbon content. Organic waste be transformed in compost, and compost has a very rich power to improve soil carbon content of the soil, and then rise the soil carbon content of most of soil was quite low, and with that improve their property and maybe go back to more agronomy, feasibility, and to develop crops with less pesticides, less mineral fertilizers, with the better soil functioning thanks to this organic content. That could come from manures also, but also from waste from city composted.
And are you finding that these technologies are commercially viable?
Of course.
Yes, of course they are. But I mean, that's the interesting thing, that, you know, perhaps 10 years ago they wouldn't have been. So there's a lot of research that goes into making recycling technologies. I remember a lady from your company showed me, it was a little bit of plastic. It looked like a little bit of plastic, but it wasn't. I mean, I'm not sure that I want to know what it was made from, but it looked like a little bit of plastic, but it wasn't. I think it was organic waste, actually. But it was extraordinary.
I think it was plastic made from sludge, no?
Yeah.
Sludge,
Yeah.
yes.
It's another technology, but you can, extract some molecule from municipal sludge and then transform into bioplastics.
Right.
Okay. We have done that in the Brussels steps here.
So this is an encouraging development, that technology is allowing some recycling techniques, and we were talking to Tim as well about his very precise ability to fertilize things. This is becoming more economically viable, John, some of these things.
Yes, yeah, the precision agriculture is, you know, very, very viable.
Tell us more about precision agriculture.
Well, it's being precise with where you put your fertilizer.
Is that mostly it?
No, it involves a vast number of different technologies coming together, from GPS to satellite, you know, satellite tracking and knowledge of where the, basically doing a bioassay as you harvest the previous crop and all sorts of things. So there's a lot involved in it. It's not as if you just start doing it, but nonetheless, it is great. I mean, it's another form of better resource use, and what you've just been talking about is waste management by one argument, or resource use by another argument. All of that is what has to happen, and that's what I think we're talking about with the rethinking the innovation model to achieve the SDGs. We don't just think about how do we do agriculture differently. We think about how do we, as society, manage the food system differently.
Yes, but in the previous discussion, I came out with the distinct impression that Tim was of a view that it was going to be quite difficult to move consumers, at least not at a high speed, quite difficult, therefore, to move supermarkets. And therefore, he was prepared to say, all right, farmers probably, in many ways, have to take the initiative here. And then you, as these individuals, I mean, extraordinary, are dragging everybody along with you. So maybe they are providing the momentum.
Well, one of the points I made at the end of one of the slides is it recognizes and challenges where is power, and so who's in charge of all this business, and that in itself is a massive debate. Who should be in charge is another, you know, is another discussion. Jeffrey Sachs had a few thoughts on on power this afternoon, are quite entertaining. So what I think we need to do is be aware of the need. We're talking about the SDGs. We're not just talking about agriculture. In order to address the charge, we need to think big, and we need to think about us as society. So we've had a little bit of conversation about the importance of helping smallholders. Absolutely right. The bigger challenge for me, though, to me, is how do we manage we, the overconsumers? Because as we see another 2 billion people move into middle class in the next couple of decades, which is by and large a good thing, increase in wealth, along with that comes a change of diet, and there's a very well-known relationship between available wealth and calorie consumption. That will bring all manner of challenges to society, health challenges, but the environmental footprint of satisfying that potential demand using the current way of doing business, the way the food system currently operates, would be absolutely massive. And again, Jeff Sachs was alluding to this. So to address the SDGs, we need to think about them in a basket rather than just, well, have that one through this ministry. And so reshaping the way the ministry system works ultimately is what perhaps might be needed. Reshaping the way the policies work to help enable change to the place that we think we have as I like the word, a nascent vision, will need a lot of nurturing.
I think
that it's
embryonic was
embryonic. I beg your pardon. Embryonic. Okay. Well, I'm going to one step further along. I'm now nascent.
Okay.
So
Anna,
we've emerged.
Anna, you were getting excited about this idea of farmers being given a stronger voice. I think that's what you were getting excited about. I don't know.
Well, I actually was, the thought was, what is it going to take? So with consumers, perhaps is education, understanding, help them connect the challenges that we are having with nutrition and obesity, like health issues, with some of these other complex systems and how our food is grown and what is the real cost of the food we buy versus the cost versus the price, right? We're very good at putting prices at food or any of our stuff, but not really good at realizing the cost of it. I think that with producers is really look at incentives. What type of incentives can they have to adopt sustainable practices, to protect the soil, to reverse the trend of soil erosion and degradation leading to the loss of 1/3 of arable land just in the last 40 years, right? What can we do to help them with financial incentives, market incentives, training, opportunities, so that especially the 500 million of small producers globally, that the next generations are proud, that they want to stay within farming, that they go to school and they come back to farming and feel proud about it, and not found themselves in an absolutely impossible situation in which it costs them more to produce food than they can sell them for, therefore becoming very secondary environmental interests or human rights interests or other issues, right? And for industries and the private sector to really realize their responsibility and act on their pledges and commitments with transparency, collaborative spirit, and real accountability.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, please.
I'd like to come in still on the waste and resources angle to bring two areas of action within the European Union that I think are promising. One is there's this new brand, the circular economy, through which we aim to keep for longer in the human economy those materials and energy flows we extract from nature before getting them back to nature. And that has something to do also with food production and agriculture from the angle of sustainable use of resources. Two examples. Imagine just how much we waste from over-fertilization, costs for the agricultures and costs for the environment, for human health, if we can make a better recycling and reuse of such fertilizers. That's purely circular economy and very promising. And the other from fertilizers, again, there's a proposal from the European Commission of a new fertilizers regulation that aims exactly to tap more from bio-waste to make it and waste-based fertilizers and so that they can be used. And finally, there will also be an initiative on the reuse of treated wastewater, which in itself, when used in agriculture, is another way of tapping some nutrients back into the system.
Oh, very good.
Right. Can I open up to the floor? Yes, please. There's a hand here. And even better, a person attached to it. There we go. Yes, please. A microphone there, please. How do you feel about shouting? Oh, I think we may have the microphones here. That might be what the problem is. Okay.
I don't know if you can hear. Here.
United Nations ECOSOC Common Actions Caucus, and we made, when the SDGs were presented in New York, recommendations to really go to the deep drivers between the silos, between the goals.
Yeah.
Because Mark Twain said, when we lost our direction, we doubled our efforts. Our challenge is to bring many goals together. And this work was done for the MDGs was for the Millennium Projects, Futures, Global Lookouts for the grand challenges, to really go to the deep drivers. And there's much work. Go to the internet, go to the tweets, because it's very essential that we go to the root causes, to the deep drivers. And this work on participatory, normative, and prognostic futures was done in the 60s by the first people in the Club of Rome. So I'm very angry and whatever here, because before Rio, Asher Koshler tabled the intersectorial strategic dilemma, that we are not lost in one solution, but really look what the European Commission is doing now around the Black Sea, have reefs to clean the ocean, provide food through mussel reefs, support the agriculture through the milling, and do something around infrastructure and education and all this. These win-wins leverage solutions are all written. Please see what the civil society is doing before and after Rio.
Good. Any thoughts on that? Okay. So the story has started long ago, I think, is the main message there. Could anybody else up for a question? Yes, please. Is it possible to get a microphone? If you say who you are and where you're from.
Alec de Sellier. I farm in Nicaragua on a very small farm. I have no electricity, I have no running water, and my wells are dry. The climate change is a very important issue. If you have no water, you cannot have crops. And the only solution is to go away. Fortunately, I can find solutions. I would like to stress the point of education, availability of information. When you have no electricity, you don't have the internet, you have nothing.
Yeah.
And you have very few people that come and help you. So education and example. So what we're going to try and do in a small part of the world, we're going to have the plastic pouch to produce our methane to do the cooking. So it reduces the amount of wood we burn. And I think there's so many little things that can be done if we start helping the people on the ground and go with a sort of missionary willingness to help the people, the small guys, that cannot have access to markets, that are on a survival level. I think there's so many things we can do, but we have to start today. And instead of inventing or investing in huge machinery, if we go in the field and help people to have little pouches so they can produce their gas. And you produce, of course, a very useful nutrient for your plants. We can produce wood vinegar by just producing wood carbon. And you take the fumes and you produce wood vinegar. There's so many things, small things, that are easy to put into action. But nobody helps the small farmers. Nobody goes out to show them these simple technologies. Compost. Once you have compost, you have a good nutrient for your field. We're talking about chemical industries and things like that. But there are so many things that can be done at a very low level of technology if we go out there and help the people. Thank
Sounds
you.
as if you're very... Yes, I'm sure that you would like to have a word with that.
I hear your pain, but I think it might be unfair to say nobody doing anything out there, right? I think that there's some of us trying with all we got. It's just not enough. So I agree with you, and I've seen the outcome and the impact of such inputs, and it's inspiring. I've seen productivity increase without additional chemical input with thousands of cocoa farmers in Côte d'Ivoire, or water rivers that they had dried come back, the water come back in Kenya with small tea farmers. So there are a number of solutions. What we need is to scale up at a level that we have never done before.
There's a question over here. Yes, please.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I have a question to John Ingram.
Could you say who you are and where you're from?
Yes, Eric Payen from Swiss Re Corporate Solutions. I have a question to John Ingram. How can we show the costs of externalities better, so especially to the consumers?
How can we share the cost of
Externalities.
How can we show the costs? Whew. Well, I think the honest person in me would say, I don't know. But I think I'm going to almost have to leave it like that. I don't know because I haven't had with you a conversation of how we agree what we mean by externalities. So you've got to have a definition, you've got to have a boundary around such a conversation. Perhaps one of my colleagues in the audience would like to answer, but that's unfair of me to point.
Yes, please. Microphone here, please, in the middle. Thank you.
There are issues involved. We do know about the cost, the environmental cost of many of the technologies. But if you want to put how much dollars is it on a hamburger, I've seen figures from 2,000 to 20,000. You know, it's an extraordinarily difficult thing just to pick a number out of the air.
It's interesting that people are trying to make the calculation, though. Yes, please.
Hello, Richard Fitzgerald, New Zealand sheep and beef and arable farmer. I'm also project lead for a national extension design system project that we're undertaking. Clearly, farmers are key players or key actors in a complex adaptive system. And when we think of their adoption of innovation, it needs to provide or present them with hope for a better future, a better way of life for their farm business. So whether it's an adoption of technology or new management practice or whatever, they need to have confidence that actually the future is going to be better for them and their business and their family through that change. We've also heard today about increasing regulation or increasing legislation and compliance. So is there a risk that as we've introduced more subsidy payments, more compliance or incentives, we've actually inadvertently been disincentivizing or making the future potential of an innovation less clear to the farmer?
Well, we have an answer to that possibly within the EU.
I'm not sure of what was the question.
I think you're saying, should taxation or regulation form a role in enforcing farmers or supermarkets or whatever to try to produce sustainable food? Is that it?
Okay.
No.
Okay, I can address regulation if
Oh,
that's the
are
issue.
subsidies squashing innovation? Okay, yeah, well.
Okay, subsidies. Not necessarily, or let me start by regulation, if I may, because I've often seen the attack on regulation as hampering innovation, red tape and so forth. That's something that's amply shown that when regulation comes in, it's a constrainment, but through the constrainment, it fosters innovation often. So whenever you set a limit, a target, no-go area, the innovation comes in. Subsidies can go both ways. A perverse incentive or subsidy will be counter-innovation, but if you shape it adequately, you can actually bring in a lot of innovation. So I don't think there's an issue on subsidies, on regulation, not allowing innovation. They just need to be well shaped towards that.
Any other thoughts on that?
Not on that.
Okay. I think there we must leave it. We have a couple of minutes left, but I think we'll have to leave it there. I'd like to thank all of the panelists, Umberto and Anna and Marlene and also John. So allow me to thank them first of all. Thank you.
Thank you.